You can fit so many gigabits in this thing. All right, so first off, in my last video, well, the last video I filmed, in case you haven't noticed, I filmed these out of order and just kind of post them out whenever I've got. I don't have that much time to film. Everybody saw this nice young man in the background and wanted to know who he was. This right here is Fitz. This is my sister's dog who is moving up to DC, and so we're going to be taking him for a few months. That few months might take on forever though. That's kind of the goal. But yeah, this is Fitz, and he is a very good boy. Go on. All right, so with that out of the way, now on to what you clicked on the video for. I'm finally going 25 gigabit. So I've had everything in place for a while now to actually start getting 25 gigabit speeds, but now we're actually going to be able to do it. So this right here is a switch that UniFi sent me. They don't get to see this video or anything, but they sent me this switch for free, and it is the UniFi Pro-Aggregation switch. It is the upgrade to the switch with 20 SFP plus ports on it and 4 SFP28 25 gigabit ports on there. And so we're going to be upgrading this, meaning I can finally hook up my TrueNAS scale build to 25 gigabit. I've had all the pieces in place for a while. My network switch in my laundry room, the actual 10 gigabit switch, supports 25 gig speeds. And now this will finally allow those all to be connected together. I've had this all set up for a really long time. I've been basically adding pieces in for a while. Currently the network card that it is in that TrueNAS build is actually a 25 gigabit card. It's just running at 10 gig speeds. So everything has been in place for a really long time, but now I'm finally going to be able to hook it all up together because of this switch. The reason this took so long is this has been out of stock for a very long time, and it finally came back in stock and they were able to send it over to me. And so we're going to be replacing the old X16, the UniFi 10 gigabit switch that I've had for a very long time. It was actually my first 10 gigabit really big switch, and we're going to be replacing it out of my server room. And so the reason I'm doing this is to go that 25 gig speeds. It's also going to have a lot more SFP plus ports on there, so I can really add anything I want. But now the file server, which is designed to be the fastest thing in the network, will have the fastest possible speeds out of here. And it's also going to allow me to start doing 25 gigabit testing. I am going to be getting a 25 gigabit card also for my VM host. And so that way I can test out a lot of different things. So if I get some new NASs in here that have 25 gigabit capability, I can test their single client 25 gigabit throughput in Windows as well as Linux. All right, so now let's go ahead and open this thing on up. All right, so now in a much more manageable box, this right here is the UniFi Pro-Aggregation. And so it's got 20 SFP plus ports on there, which are all 10 gigabit, and 4 SFP28 ports on there. And it retails for $900 US. All right, so this is it right here. We've got 20 SFP plus ports, as well as 4 SFP28 ports. Just gonna go over a really quick briefing of this switch. I'm not gonna spend a ton of time on it just because you can look at the stat page yourself, and that's not really what this video is. So these 4 SFP28 ports are kind of weird, but that's not a big deal at all for this switch. If one of these is at 10 gig speeds or 1 gig speeds, all 4 of them have to be at 10 gig or 1 gig speeds. For this switch, that does not matter at all. I cannot imagine a customer needing exactly 22 SFP plus ports, but also then needing a 25 gigabit port. So it's one of those things where it doesn't really matter too much on this switch. It does matter, and it can be annoying on that 10 gig switch, the 10 gig RJ45 switch. That actually has 2 SFP28 ports, and that does not have any SFP plus ports. And so you can actually run in that situation there, but I just want to get that out of the way there. And finally, it does not have dual redundant power supplies, but it does have that DC input. If you need some kind of redundant power in your switch, it's a nice to have. It's like, gets you over the finish line maybe, but I would not fully rely on it. You should really rely on it as a, hey, if something goes bad, we're not gonna kill the network immediately. Instead, we'll just have to have a planned outage. Not gonna talk much about that. And the last thing I'm just gonna very briefly touch on is the layer 3 parts of the switch. UniFi sells this as a layer 3 switch. It technically has layer 3 capabilities, but they're very limited right now. UniFi is putting a lot in. They are improving those layer 3 capabilities. But today, I would not consider this a layer 3 switch. I would really not consider many UniFi switches at all, or any of them, as actually layer 3 as most people would expect them, as you have to really hard code everything. The only way I would really consider this a layer 3 switch is if you literally wanted just 2 VLANs to fully be able to talk, and that was it. You didn't have any routing rules. You just wanted to sequester off 2 different VLANs, and that's it. You want to have 2 VLANs, but full routing in between them. And so otherwise, wait a little while before calling this layer 3. All right, and so now let's talk about why this switch is awesome. This switch is a $900 switch that has 20 SFP plus ports on it and 4 SFP 28 ports on it. And in all honesty, there are not a lot of switches in its class for that price point at all. Especially when you consider it is fully managed, essentially. It can do anything you need it to from a layer 2 connectivity standpoint. It's got all that working. It is a great value of a switch, in all honesty. I do have really 2 concerns with this thing, and that is going to be noise and noise. So this switch hopefully is going to be quieter than my X16. My X16 is a SFP plus switch from UniFi that I've had for a very long time. They're trying to kill it off, but there's no real true replacement for it because it has 12 SFP plus ports on it and 4 10 gigabit RJ45 ports on it. And so because of that, it is a great switch for a HomeLab. It is so nice to have that switch because you can easily hook up multiple different types of things, and you probably have 4 computers that you actually want 10 gig speeds to. Well, boom, you've got those 4 RJ45 ports on there, which can hook up to your computer. And so that is a great value switch. But for me, I want to go fast, and I want to expand that a ton. So my plan for this is to have 2 of the ports hooked up to my all SSD TrueNAS build that is running my file server. It is my lightning fast editing file server. And so I'm going to have 2 of those ports hooked up to that. And I'm not going to be doing aggregation on them. I'm not going to be doing link aggregation. The reason I'm not going to be doing link aggregation is because link aggregation can eat through some of your single client throughput. It's not as bad on Linux as it is on BSD, but it does have a difference. I've done extensive testing, and I found when I do have them set up as link aggregation on the switch to the actual TrueNAS box, there is a bit of diminish in the single client throughput. Only at about 10%, but I'm chasing the fastest speeds right now. And so because of that, the way I've currently got it set up is I've got 2 10 gig connections to the current switch on separate VLANs. And so that way my computer and my laptop are also on separate VLANs. That way I don't have to do link aggregation and I can still get the fastest throughput. But with this right here, I will be able to do that, but I won't have to sequester everything off into its own VLAN. I still will have them on 2 different VLANs because I want to be able to have all the storage stuff hooked up to this at the fastest possible speeds. And then I'm also going to have my own computers being able to hook up to it at the fastest speeds. So essentially I can have 2.5 10 gig connections to the file server all on the exact same VLAN. And so that way my laptop, my computer, and 1 other device can have the maximum possible throughput to the SMB file server, which is fully what I need, way past what I need. And so that is all going to be done through my aggregation network in the laundry room. And so by having this all together, I can really simplify things out and get really fast speeds. The other thing that's going to be absolutely awesome about this is now I'm going to be able to start testing things out at full 25 gigabit speeds. I'm going to be able to hook up different things at 25 gigabit speeds and see, hey, what can they do? How fast is their single client throughput? And be able to test a lot more things. And so this switch is going to allow me to do that, and I'm very excited for that. The only thing I'm really worried about it with is the power draw and the noise. It says it's 100 watts max, and I'm not expecting to hit that just because that's probably under heavy load with everything going. These switches, because they do not have any RJ45 ports on them, 10 gig RJ45 ports that is, tend to actually have a lot lower power draw than their equivalent RJ45 version. That's because fiber is a lot lower power draw for 10 gig networking and beyond than copper is. That's because there is so much signal denoising you need to do when you're going over copper twisted pairs. With fiber, light does not have that, and the short DAC cables don't have that. So because of that, you do not need nearly as much power to power a SFP plus port as a 10 gig RJ45 port. And so I'm expecting that to not only decrease the noise, but also the heat output through it, and therefore the power draw. All right, so really quick, before we go ahead and put this in my rack, the one thing I'm going to test out here and do it on mic is going to be the fan noise. And so that way I can tell you if it's going to be too loud for you or not, and if it's even going to work for me. I'm actually pretty surprised. In the box, they actually sent a 10 gig SFP Plus DAC cable, which I was not expecting to get. That's not just a given that when you buy a switch like this. Nice to have, would not expect it, but it's definitely nice to have. And a nice braided power cable. So we're just gonna go ahead and test that out. There's also obviously your rack ears and a small user manual in there. Nothing you've not seen before from a UniFi product. So another really nice feature that it does have is it has a built-in power supply, which for a switch of this class, you absolutely expect it to. But the power supply is also locking. So there's a little notch back here that you just push in. And so that way the power supply does just not come out. So this cable, you can tug on it and it's not gonna come out until you unlock it. Really nice to have. So now it should be booting up. And we're gonna do the best part. Unplug this. We're gonna pull the sticker off. So now I'm gonna let it boot up and then we'll go ahead and talk. We're gonna do a quick fan test here where we actually see how loud the fans get at different RPMs and different speeds. Then once it's actually under a synthetic load kind of set up without a ton of things running in my rack, we can look at what RPM they're at, what speed they're at, and that way kind of get a correlation to how loud the thing's gonna be. So we'll let this thing boot really quick. Wow, that was a very fast boot time. So now just manually on here, I can dial in an exact fan speed. So with it off right now, so nothing actually plugged into it, but the thing on, it is currently at 24%. So now we're going to manually bring that up to 50%. You get some noise. That's actually a lot of noise. That is more noise than like an Xbox ever makes. 40% is almost dead silent. 100% really loud. Okay, so this is always an arbitrary test. Yes, it's on microphone. Yes, I could get a decibel sensor. All those things completely do not matter. Decibels do not really communicate how loud something is. They technically do, but depending on how the sound is actually distributed through the actual frequency range of your human hearing can change how uncomfortable it is for you entirely. Long story short, I try to give a perspective on, for a home user, is this appropriate? Would you have this in an office with you? So at 40% fan speed, I would probably say that that's about the maximum you can go. If it's at 40% there, we're gonna try to see how much stuff we hook up to it and what percent it's at. But in an office with you where it's just you, 40% is probably about where I'd say is the maximum. You definitely can get up there on this where it is uncomfortable, but we need to see when it operates there. It may be one of those things where it only really gets up to those faster fan speeds when you're actually pushing a lot of data. So it's one of those things where if you're working really hard and you're moving a bunch of files and the fans on this thing kick on a little bit because it's moving so many packets, that's probably fine. If it was idling at that 24/7 just because you've got X number of things plugged in, that's where it's not gonna be. So I'd say 40% is the maximum I would be okay with idle. And then from there, it's up to your own use. 100%? 100% is loud. 100% is very loud. It's not screaming. It's not like an enterprise server booting up, but it's loud. So definitely has a chance to get up there. We're gonna continue this test after it's under load and I've added everything in there, and then we'll talk. All right, but now with all that out of the way, I'm gonna go ahead and attach some rack gears to this guy right here, and we're gonna go in and we're actually gonna do the install on this thing in my server room. While we're doing this, one other thing it does come with, it comes with feet. So it's got optional rubber feet right here that you can stick onto the bottom of it in case you decide to run it on top of your desk or something. Would probably not recommend that. It's an interesting choice, but can't knock them for including it in the box. So if you're wondering why during that time lapse there was some squeaky noise going on, there's currently squeaky noise going on now, it's because Fitz found his toy and he's having a very nice time. So we're gonna go ahead and go into the server room and install this, and Fitz is gonna have a nice time with his toy. Real quick interjection here. I want to do a quick overview of SFP Plus versus SFP 28 really quick because it's super useful. So on the fiber side, this right here is an SFP 28. This right here is an SFP Plus. They are the exact same size and shape and they look pretty identical. There is really no outside difference between these two objects other than the sticker on them. So that is one really useful piece of information, is SFP 28 is backwards compatible with SFP Plus and just SFP. Very much the same way that a 10 gig Ethernet port can go to 1 gig as well as 100 megabit. So that is just, I wanted to do a quick interjection there. And there's actually DAC cables the exact same way. DAC cables can be done the same way. And so I am also going to be having to do a very quick upgrade on my actual 25 gigabit setup. I'm gonna have to change my 10 gig SFP Plus DAC cables to 25 gigabit SFP 28 DAC cables. So I'm also gonna be doing that, and so that way I can run everything well. All right, and so I just wanna do that here and really, where you can actually see up close and everything. And now we're gonna go into the guest bedroom, AKA the server room, and set this thing up finally. Really excited. All right, and so now we are actually in here, and this is the rack. And this right here is that X16 UniFi switch that I'm going to be replacing. And so as you can see, there's a ton of stuff already hooked up to it. So it's going to be replacing it. Just to give a quick overview, the first bunch of ports right here, those are all hooked up to various 10 gig things on my network right now. And so we're going to be replacing all those. Those are all running SFP Plus, except for 2 of them will be running SFP 28 to those 4 SFP 28 ports on it. And then right here, we have some fiber optic ports. And those are going to be switched over. Those are connecting it to the internet in my laundry room, as well as to my 10 gig RJ45 switch that essentially allows everybody who wants to have a 10 gig connection to have a 10 gig connection. And so that is going to be another thing we're replacing, and we're going to be upgrading to that 25 gigabit. Should be very nice. I'm going to do all the VLAN stuff later, just because I can do it and it's not worth it for me to film it. We're just going to carry on and over. But step 1 right now is to essentially just replace all this stuff out and upgrade it. So now I'm going to shut this thing down and slowly figure out everything I need to do, as well as replace those 2 SFP Plus ports to SFP 28 ports. Those are the ones that are going to be going to the file server. So we're going to go ahead and do that now, and it's probably going to be time lapse because there's a lot of stuff plugged in here. Alright, so now I just got all that unplugged. Next up is going to be getting out. I hate screwing and unscrewing things from a wrap. It's absolutely organized in here. But yeah, so it's going to be fun getting all that out and then hooking everything back up. While I'm doing this, I should also mention one other thing. Part of the beauty of this is, while I'm doing all this stuff right here, Katie will not notice. The internet, the Wi-Fi, everything is going to stay up and running. Even though this is the top of rack switch. This is your aggregation switch. And so that's one of the beauties of having kind of your HomeLab server rack entirely segregated from the rest of your network. Because when this goes down, and it will quite often if you're doing upgrades and fun things, you want to be doing fun things, don't you? You will still have the ability to have your home network up and running. And so you don't have to do everything at like midnight. Instead, you can do everything on your own time because the only stuff that goes down is your stuff. There's a couple of things that Katie uses that are in here, but those are nice to haves. They're not required. My rule for everything is Wi-Fi and internet must stay up no matter what. And so that's why I've got an entirely separate network closet that actually handles all the Ethernet cables and Wi-Fi for the entire house. That's also where the actual gigabit Ethernet comes in for my router. And so that's all managed elsewhere in the laundry room. And so we're going to have some uplinks to that in here as well. Sure, this is absolutely phenomenal video quality right here. That's why you watch SpaceX, right? Get the best, most beautiful shots. Basically MKBHD. Everything's super clean. Exactly clear what's going on. Actually, it was not too bad to get out. Yeah, so now I've got this guy pulled out right here. And we're gonna definitely do a video on him. He's been a great switch to have. I'm gonna miss him a lot. But now we got this thing right here. and you can fit so many gigabits in this thing, at least 25. I swear every single time I replace a switch or anything in a rack, it feels like I'm kind of doing rock climbing, where you're just using your muscles in ways you never expected to and never do, and so it's way harder than it should be. Whew. I'm out of breath. But once you get the first 2 rack screws in, it's a lot easier. You can just do the last ones. Normally, you'd have somebody around to help, but it's fine. All right, so step 1 is done. We've removed out the old switch and brought a new one. Was actually not that bad. Now, all that's really left to do is just rerun those 10 gig cables to 25 gig DACs and plug everything back in, and then we can start adopting stuff to the network and see how fast we can get this thing to go. Okay, that's finally done. It was a nightmare to get out those DAC cables. I had them in there, and they had cable management up the wazoo, but now I can finally put these in. These are actually thinner ones because they are not as long of runs. I had way too long of runs in there just because I wanted to test out different lengths and everything, and I want to be able to pull the servers out, and then I way overspec'd it. So now we're going to be inputting the 25 gigabit DAC cables into the 25 gigabit server into the 25 gigabit switch. We're finally going to be there. All right, so now I just went through quickly, ran those 25 gig DAC cables a lot easier this time. Now I'm going to spend a little bit of time putting everything back together. Then we can start actually setting this thing up. All right, so now that was actually a lot quicker than I thought it would be. We've got link lights on everything, and so this switch is running. So it has now replaced everything, except I don't have the 25 gigabit setup to my 10 gig switch in the laundry room. But right now, everything's running in here, and it's not under any load, but there are 9 different things plugged in the switch, 2 of them being SFP28. No load right now. I mean, anything that just happens to be running will be running, but that is very good news because it's not kicked on the fans really at all. Right now the fans are at 34% and they're quiet. They're honestly quieter than the X16 that I just replaced it with, which is perfect. Now I'm just going to go ahead and use one of these fiber optic cables to get the 25 gig set up to my 10 gig switch in my laundry room, and then we're going to be good. All right, so what I just did there is I just grabbed a SFP28 transceiver and converted out the SFP Plus transceiver. And so now that will be 25 gig capable. I may have just dropped all my speeds though to 10 gigabit because this switch, if you plug in a 10 gigabit port on the 25 gigabit things, all 4 of them have to be 10 gigabit now. So I may have just knocked that out because the end over there in the laundry room does not yet have a 25 gig transceiver on there. I'm just gonna go ahead and switch it out really quick. Not gonna film it because the dryer's on. All right, well that was actually pretty easy. So now it's all hooked up. We can see that we have 3 devices operating at full 25 gigabit speeds. And so now we can start doing everything we'd like to do. Now I'm just gonna go in and do all the boring adoption stuff, and we're going to get to do the speed test that we've been really waiting for. I'm very excited for this. My goal is to be able to, on a single line in this card, saturate 2 10 gigabit connections. And so that way I will not have to deal with any random VLAN stuff, and it's all going to be a lot easier. So we're gonna go ahead and test that out after I finish cleaning up a little bit in here. And then we'll go from there. All right, and so now I'm back after some really quick testing. Didn't have a ton of time to really get into it today, but I did want to give my overall findings. 1, I was able to get 2 10 gigabit connections to it saturated using Samba to my file server, which was exactly what I was hoping for. I was able to do that with no issues on the exact same NIC. And so that just opens it up a ton. I did have to enable async IO for read speeds on the TrueNAS server itself. I'm really hoping this comes more standard. They tune a little bit better. I do think Scale is a little bit behind in terms of core, in terms of overall speed, but I need to use it because there's an issue with my specific HBA and BSD apparently. But I was able to get over 900 megabytes per second read at the exact same time on both my computer as well as my laptop, both over 10 gig connection. And so that was great. So I'm able to do that. I also found that the fans did kick on a little bit during the heaviest part of the test. It went up to about 40%. Not bad. It basically got to the same input as the X16 was. under my load. So this was getting about 2 gigabytes per second coming in and out of one port, plus a few other things all hooked up together. So that was a real load, but it was not a crazy heavy one, but that's about where we are. Hopefully it does not get much louder than that. That was with it running for about an hour. So it's hopefully hit steady state by now, but it may kick up a little bit past that. It was great. But overall, we're finally there. I finally have this connection done, and it's going to open up so much testing. It was a big old pain in the butt to get it all working together because it just took a while to rip everything out and put everything together because I had kind of organized everything pretty well. But now we are finally there. Go and leave any other tutorials you'd like to see me make or anything you'd like me to check out in my HomeLab. I really want to do a lot of specific videos on things that people are interested in. So if you've got any ideas for HomeLab videos that you want to check out how I do things, please put those down in the comments below and have a good one. Bye.